Hey everybody, it's Jason Wood from 11 O'Clock Comics, of course. And as you can see from the cover image, we are going to talk about previews in this video. This is catalog number 416, cover date May 2023, with the vast majority of the books that we're going to talk about coming out into comic stores in July or a bit later. As I alluded, if you've already watched the sister video to this, I looked at Marvel and DC's previews and Connect catalogs yesterday. And I mentioned on that it was a fairly light month for the big two, but it was a massive month for the main previews catalog. And we're going to dive into it. There are nearly 40 items that I felt I had to call your attention to. And, bluntly, I could have done 80 if I thought that you all had the time and attention span to listen to me drudge on that long, but tried to tighten it up, kept it to 40, which is still a lot. So let's dive right in. As always, we're going to start with Image because it is the first publisher at the front of the catalog. And even more than that, Image is just, as is often the case, on top of the industry from my vantage right now. They just have so many books that I think are incredibly well done and appealing. They have such breadth, such depth, and it's one of those things where unless you just purely solely committed to being a Capes fan and only read superhero comics, which all love if that's you, I can't fathom though if you profess to like non-superhero comics how Image couldn't be beloved for you. There's just no other publisher objectively over the last 10 years that has put out the level and quantity of diverse, exceptionally well done entertainment that Image has put out. So there's a ton of Image, as always, in this video. In fact, it's almost half of what we're going to talk about, and that's just because it deserves to be. Up first is Big Game, number 1 of 5. This is another Mark Millar book. Mark has been on a tear of late. And this is drawn by Pepe Larraz, who has been one of Marvel's go-to artists for a bunch of years, and he's finally making the leap into creator-owned. And generally speaking, Mark Millar's success at Image doing his books has been so massive that he is now at the point where he can pretty much, it seems, get any amazing artist to partner up with him on an idea. And Pepe is just the latest in a long line. What's cool about this is an event book, and it is a 5-issue limited series that's going to bring a good chunk of the characters we've seen in Mark Millar comics together into a big crisis-level event. And that's a lot of fun. It's been a long time since we had a non-Marvel or Big Two connected universe event. Like, they happened more frequently in the 80s and 90s, when there were a lot of other smaller publishers that still tried to do connected universe stuff. But it's been a minute, and I'm here for it, especially because the majority of the characters that are going to be featured are characters that I've had fun reading their individual books, right? The Millar World stuff. So in the solicit, it mentions Kick-Ass, Kingsman, Nemesis, The Magic Order, and all the Millar World franchises. So, I mean, my personal enjoyment of those characters in particular varies. In fact, Kick-Ass is probably one of my least favorite of the Millar properties, but fine nonetheless. It's not like I'm opposed to him. It's just not. That has not been atop my list of Millar projects. But I adore the Magic Order. I adore Kingsman, and as I think I mentioned on the podcast a week or two ago, I haven't read Nemesis yet, so I'm going to need to correct that before Big Game comes out. But yeah, this should be a blast. You know, it's going to look amazing, as you can see from the attached art here, and it's going to be a hoot. Hopefully it is something that a lot of you are into too, so we can all geek out about it. Next up at Image is Fish Flies, number 1 of 6. This is written and drawn by Jeff Lemire, who you know I'm a big mark for and consider a friend. And this was a book that he was serializing on his Substack for the last year or two. And I admit, as much as I love Jeff, I just don't find myself subscribing to Substacks and reading them because it's not my preferred way to consume things. So this is going to be de novo for me. And Jeff is so prolific, and I think he's an amazing writer when he's writing for other artists. But since I got to know him as a writer-artist on things like Essex County, I'm just always thrilled when he takes the time to write and draw his own thing. And so I know for some of you, you're already very familiar with Fish Flies, but for me, it's going to be brand spanking new stuff. Up next is a book by some lesser-known creators, but I think I've heard good things about it, and the preview art looks great, and that's Antarctica #1. The story is by Simon Burks with art by Willie, Willi Roberts, and the pitch is Stargate meets His Dark Materials in a new nonstop sci-fi action blockbuster. Admittedly, of the things we've talked about so far, this is the biggest leap of faith because the creators involved are new to both me and I assume most of you. But like I said, given Image's track record, given what I've seen of the preview art, and given the pitch, I'm excited to at least give the first issue a try and see if it can hook me. Up next is Swan Songs #1. This is by Maxwell Prince, W. Maxwell Prince, if we're being fully specific, with art by Martin Simmons. Maxwell Prince has been one of Image's stalwarts in the last bunch of years, largely for things like Ice Cream Man and Ha Ha, and this is his latest project. And it's going to be a multi-artist project, so even though Martin Simmons is attached here, other artists are going to be involved as well, including Casper Wingard and Philippe Andrade. And it's essentially an anthology looking at ends of things. So like the end of the world, the end of a sentence, the end of a marriage. And it's going to tell, I assume, darkly bented stories about that. So think of Twilight Zone with a hook, right? And we know from Ice Cream Man that that Prince is very comfortable in this serialized story of the month mode. Now, this next one is probably the thing I'm most excited about that I didn't know about before opening up the catalog, if that makes sense. Meaning that a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight, I was already aware were happening through solicits or through knowing the creators. This is not something I knew was coming. Just must have missed it if it was talked about. And that is This Ends Tonight, #1 of a 3-issue limited series. It is written by a trio, Jerry Duggan, Kelvin Mao, and Robert Wyndham. And the art is by Jay Lee. And I love Jay Lee's art. I mean, love, love, love. The only reason you don't hear me talk about Jay Lee as often on the podcast as someone like a Matteo Scalera or a David Rubin is because Jay just doesn't do interiors very often. He makes a great living doing covers for a crap ton of comics, and he's very active on the con scene doing commissions and the like, and he's, by his own admission, in fact, he's very self-deprecating about it, he's a very slow artist. And so early in his career, when he was doing interiors, he would often miss deadlines. And so he's had to evolve, or he just doesn't do interiors quite often. So it's great to see that Jerry Duggan lured him into this miniseries. And it makes sense that it's only 3 issues, because, again, that fits what we know of Jay taking a long time to do a book. But what we do know, and you can see a bit here in the preview images, is it is going to be a stone cold stunner. It is going to be a visual treat. And I just can't wait. I can't wait. I'm so thrilled that we're going to get an action book featuring Jay Lee interiors for the first time in a long time. And Duggan is a proven known commodity, so I think that's a good choice. I'm intrigued that there's 2 other writers. The way I'm going to interpret that is that this is probably more like Duggan putting his name to the book and helping oversee or show run just to make sure the book flows. But then I'm guessing this is probably more of a Mao and Wyndham written idea, right? I was thinking Time Before Time. A few years ago, we had Declan Shalvey on the show when that book first launched, and he is listed as a co-creator and co-writer, but he was very open about the fact that, he's kind of more of an overseer, and that his creative partners on that book were lesser known. And so putting his name on it and being involved was able to fast track the book to success. And I suspect that's what's going on here as well. I could be totally wrong. Maybe this is a passion project for Duggan. Maybe he wrote the scripts. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. The point is, all of this looks incredible, and we're going to get Jay Lee interiors for 3 whole issues. This next book had me at shaky cane. Just like the last one, the Jay Lee interiors excited me. This book, Weird Work, number 1 of 4, has me all sorts of giddy because it's shaky cane interiors. Now, unlike Jay Lee, Shaky Kane is quite prolific. He does interior work all the time. So it's not as rare to see it, but I'll tell you what, he has such a distinctive look that there really is never a time when I see even a panel of his and I don't know it's his work. And I think that's as high a compliment as you can pay an artist. And he always does really interesting orthogonal type of stuff, right? The left of center stuff that just isn't more of the same, and I appreciate that. So he's partnered up with a writer named Jordan Thomas, who I'm not that familiar with, in this book, Weird Work, and their own pitch is that it's LA Confidential noir meets an alien-filled world of Futurama in this crime epic. So what that says to me is that this is an opportunity for Shaky to draw really crazy stuff that's totally in his wheelhouse, bizarre visuals that wouldn't normally line up in the way you think of the world. And I can't remember the last time I read a Shaky Kane drawn book that I wasn't completely entertained by. So this one seems like a pretty safe bet to me. Up next is a book that I've already read, so I won't be buying this trade paperback, but I wanted to call it to your attention in case you didn't get the issues, because it's quite good. And that's All Against All, written by Alex Pocknadel with art by Casper Wingard. Now, we have discussed this book on several episodes, including a fairly deep dive after the first issue that we all 3 of us read it. Dap and Vince also read it. In fact, I believe it was Vince's idea for us to talk about it. But this is a lot of fun. The premise is that an alien species is in constant state of war, and so they have different environments where they take predatory species that they come across in the galaxy and put them in these environments to study them and to test them and to figure out if they can use them to help modify their own fighting abilities in this constant war. And in this story, we're exposed to the fact that one of the predators is the last known human being, and that this human being is, in fact, much more than they bargained for. So, like I said, definitely worth your attention, particularly if you're a fan of like the alien predator type of storytelling. I think you'll really enjoy this. We've got 2 issues on the same page here, just both worth a quick mention. I Hate Fairyland number 7. Don't have to go too deep on that one. That's Scotty's book, of course. We're big fans of Scotty. We're big fans of this book. And this is just issue number 7 of the second volume. So, and then below that is I Hate This Place number 10, which sadly we see is billed as a series finale. This is another book that we've all been enjoying on the show. And another banger from Kyle Starks, who's having one hell of a year, with art by Artyom Topolin. And it's going to wrap it up. So we've got we're going to get 2 arcs of this. And I know it says series finale, so I'm not going to count on any more, but it's so good that I hope maybe in the future we get a 3rd or 4th volume, depending. Another Jeff Lemire joint, and that is Bone Orchard Tenement. This is number 2 of 10. We mentioned number 1 and talked a bit about what the whole series is going to be about last month, so we don't have to relitigate that. Just wanted to call your attention to the fact that we've got the 2nd issue coming. Then we have Dark Ride number 8, which is the end of this current story arc. This is written by Josh Williamson, who is also having quite a year. He is helming the upcoming DC event Night Terrors. So he is at one of the top positions at DC right now as one of their lead writers, and his creator-owned stuff's also thriving. This is a book that Vince has been reading from the start and saying great things about. I dove in at his request a month or 2 ago and caught up and think it's terrific. It's creepy and weird, and if you're a fan of like haunted houses or think carnivals can be freaky places, then this book is totally up your alley. We've got two collections to highlight here. Nemesis Reloaded, which is another Mark Millar book, this time with art by Jorge Jimenez. Yet another big two superstar artist that Miller lured into the world of creator-owned comics. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I haven't read Nemesis, either the original series or this yet, but I'm going to remedy that for sure. So between now and when the event happens in 2 months, I'll have read both of these for sure. And since I didn't buy the issues for Nemesis Reloaded, I'm going to pick up this collection. And then on the right is Oblivion Song, which is by Robert Kirkman and Lorenzo De Felici, with some fill-in work by Annalisa Leone. This is a collection, it's a compendium. It collects the entire series. It's 824 pages and it's 36 issues. This is an interesting one. I read the entire thing, but I don't know that I talked about it on the show much at all over the last 4 or 5 years it was coming out. It's a Robert Kirkman book that lasted 36 issues, and yet I feel like almost no one talked about it. And I don't know if that's an indication of what the general view of the quality of the book was, or maybe it was just Kirkman overload and people weren't ready for another big, long commitment to a Kirkman book when they just got out of one, like, getting out of one marriage and jumping into the next type of a thing. Not sure. Would I say that this is as good from start to finish as Invincible or Walking Dead? No, certainly not. But I thought it was very good. I thought it was enjoyable. It's a post-apocalyptic story involving another world where there are tons of crazy kaiju, and that's enough for me. And Kirkman's always been great at pacing, and he certainly treated each issue like its own thing and didn't write for the trade. So I give him a lot of credit for that. And I think that if you were curious about this book, these compendiums are a terrific way to sate that curiosity, because it's relatively inexpensive for the entire series. And then we've got two more collections, and these two are absolute home run bangers. I would be stunned if both of these aren't in the running for our 11 O'Clockers year-end awards, because certainly these two IP were in the running in prior years, and that is Clementine, Book 2, the very much anticipated follow-up to Clementine Book 1 by Tilly Walden. Tilly Walden writing and drawing around Clementine, the character from the Walking Dead video games, who is now, the Telltale games. And Tilly is now immersing her into a series of horror-tinged YA graphic novels set in The Walking Dead. We all loved the first volume, and I have loved everything Tilly's ever done as a writer and artist, and so I don't see how this isn't at or near the top of the best of lists for 2023 when the dust settles. And then below that is Last Man, Book 3. This is by Balak, Saint-Levy, and Vivet. We have dove deep into the first two volumes of this, so I hopefully don't need to convince you that we're fans of it. It's just this gigantic, long-running French manga. It's not a manga, obviously, because it's created by French creators, but it looks and reads like a manga. It's obviously inspired by manga. It's paced that way. It's just super high adventure with big twists and turns and over-the-top action and lots of very fast-moving character development. So I was blown away by the first two volumes, and we've got a lot more of this coming. This series ran, I believe, for close to 10 years, maybe a little more than 10 years in France. And so as long as they keep selling, and I think they're doing pretty well, we'll keep getting a volume or two every year. We're keeping the image train going with Kaya number 10. This is Wes Craig's written and drawn, creator-owned post-apocalyptic adventure featuring a brother and sister trying to find their place after their kingdom was destroyed. Love Everlasting number 9, written by friend of the show Tom King and artist Elsa Charité. This is a book that I caught up on. I was behind on it, and it's as good as anything Tom's done in his storied career. So I'm definitely reading this issue by issue now, and it's basically romance with not a horror twist, with more like a Twilight Zone type of a twist, where there's a dark aspect to the character's quest for love. We've got the mini-series finale of Monarch, which would be number 6. This is written by Rodney Barnes with art by Alex Linz. This is an interesting one. If you regularly watch my videos, you won't have seen me talk about Monarch before this. I don't have a reason for that. I mean, I've enjoyed Rodney Barnes' work, particularly on Philadelphia, so I'm a fan of his. I certainly think what I've seen of Alex Linz, most recently in doing the interiors on Hellcat, is very high quality stuff. I just must have missed this, in the sea of solicitations and not noticed it at first. And so credit to friend of the show and longtime supporter Brian Newbury on his own podcast. I heard him mention Monarch and how much he's enjoying it. And so I went back and looked and thought, well, that's weird. Why aren't I reading this? So yeah, I am going to read. I have the other issues that have already been published, and I'm going to read the whole chunk. So it looks good, and thanks to Brian for turning me on to something. We've got 2 books here that are just continuing on their stories. Old Dog number 6, which is the end of the first arc, which is Declan Shalvey's written and drawn crime book that he's doing right now. If it sounds like I'm being vague, it's because I have all the issues, but I haven't read one yet. So I can't necessarily speak to it beyond the fact that I've got immense confidence in Declan as both a storyteller and an artist. So I'm sure when I sit down to read this entire first arc, I'll be entertained. And then below that is Phantom Road number 5, which is another Jeff Lemire book, this time with Gabriel Hernandez Walta. I did do a fairly lengthy review and breakdown of the first issue when it came out on the podcast. And at the time I said I thought that it was a bit of a slow start. But listen, this is Jeff Lemire, so you know better than to worry. And it has really picked up the pace and is now running hot. So as with almost everything Jeff's ever done, absolutely worthy of your time, attention, and dollars. And then I believe this is the last Image thing we're talking about. So like I said, a ton of Image books. And that is World Tree number 4, written by James Tynion IV, with art by Fernando Blanco. And World Tree number 1 was an absolute crazy hoot. Another horror book, but this time like a dystopian look at how technology and the dark web can be used for really bad stuff happening. And again, Tynion has got such cred with me after what he's done these last few years, particularly when he's writing horror books, that this one was a no-brainer, and surprisingly, he delivered with the first issue. And we are finally moving on to the other publishers in this massive catalog. So, like I said, bow down to Image. They're having a moment, but there's still tons of other stuff worthy of our attention. We are in the Boom Studios section, and the gem of the month, per the catalog's editors, is Sirens of the City, number 1 of 6, written by Joanne Stair with art by Kari Randolph. We've had Kari on the show. He's a longtime buddy and friend of the show. He recently just moved, so hope, Kari, if you listen to this, I hope the move went well. But I know that he's been working on this for some time, and I'm excited to finally see it come to light. It is a brand new, powerfully topical urban fantasy for fans of Black Cloak and Chroma. So, just again, this is somewhat of a bet on Kari because I love his art, and I know he's very excited. I think he thinks this is the work of his career. So I'm definitely going to give this first issue a try and see what's doing. Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, number 7 of 15. It's interesting because, as you may recall, when they first launched this, it was Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, Volume 1, number 1 of 5. But it was clear at the time that Jason Aaron said it would be 3 5-issue volumes, each drawn by a different artist to convey that it was different periods of the main characters' lives. That's still what's happening, but for some reason they've morphed it from 3 5-issue series into 1 15-issue maxi series. I don't know that it really matters in the grand scheme of things. The story's still a story, but it is just one of those quirks that I happen to notice, and those kinds of things fascinate me because I'd like to be at the meeting where they actually debated this, right? Like it matters to anybody. But nevertheless, this book has been off to a terrific start. We are now into the second phase of the 3 phases where Leila Del Duca is doing the art. This is her second issue. And I haven't seen her first issue, so I can't speak to the second arc specifically yet, but I very much enjoyed the first arc. And it's wonderful to see Jason Aaron back doing creator-owned stuff where he has given us so many terrific experiences over the years. Getting back to James Tynion and his penchant for doing good horror comics, we've got Something is Killing the Children, number 31. Of course, this is arguably his biggest book, the book that kind of put him on the map for a lot of people and opened up a lot of doors. In horror, I should say, because certainly his work on Batman was I think, the big catalyst overall professionally. But this continues to be written by Tynion with art by Werther Dell'Edera, who has drawn, he's certainly drawn the majority of the issues. I can't say offhand if he's drawn all of them. No, there have been a few fill-ins, but he's certainly done the vast majority of the issues. And that's great because his style is perfect for this kind of story, which is a badass set of monster hunters fighting badass monsters. So this is the end of the current arc. It is, or I should say, maybe it's the beginning of the new arc. Apologies, I'm not sure which is which because I haven't read issue 30 yet, so I'd have to go back and look at whether 30 was billed as the end of the arc and this is the start of the new one or vice versa. Either way, I have yet to be disappointed by Something is Killing the Children through 25 plus issues that I have read, and so I don't know why we should expect anything less now. Okay, we're going to talk about a really interesting project here. That's Slaughterhouse-5, the original graphic novel, written by Kurt Vonnegut and Ryan North. Now, that's because it is a graphic novel adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's legendary book. But so it's written by Ryan North, right, in terms of the comic. And it's illustrated by Albert Montes, who most of us know from his work on Universe, which was part of the Panel Syndicate online digital first publishing house. So this one is pretty easy. If you are at all familiar with Slaughterhouse-5 and like the source material, I think this is going to be a treat. And that certainly is where I'm coming from. If you are unfamiliar with Slaughterhouse-5 or for some reason had to read it back in high school and hated it, well, this probably isn't for you. But I'm really excited by it. We are going to dip our toes into Dynamite, which is a rarity for me. I don't read much from Dynamite, but one of the things that I did read was Invincible Red Sonja, because it was written by Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti, everyone's favorite comic super couple, and it was drawn by longtime friend of the podcast, Moritat, who draws that kind of thing, particularly beautiful women, really well. It's his wheelhouse. So one of those ideas where you take 3 creators, put them in their right wheelhouse with a known character with lots of history, and you get tons of fun adventure. Now, this was never intended to be a really long run because they all have other things that they are interested in doing. So we got 10 wonderful issues. And if for some reason you weren't reading this, then you can check it out in this way, which is a nice hardcover collecting all of it. And I'm going to double dip on this, actually. And then I will give away the single issues to some lucky patron. Titan Comics is usually good every month or two for something very exciting, and this month is no exception. We've got the Tribute. Now, I must admit, if you look here at the box of the solicit, it says, before Avatar came the Tribute. Now, I realize that Avatar is one of the most successful film franchises of all time. So for many, logically, that's a great elevator pitch draw. For me, I was like, I do not want to read something that's comparing itself to Avatar. But then I saw that the creators were Roche and Legrand. And you might say, well, why does that matter, Woodrow? Well, those are the creators of Snowpiercer. For those who don't know, the film and TV series Snowpiercer, the film starring Chris Evans, the TV series starring Daveed Diggs, they were both born out of a French a series of French graphic novels that came out about a decade before. I have had the good fortune of reading those graphic novels, and they are fantastic. Or at least the first two are. And I think in many ways better than the film or the TV show. So I am intrigued at the idea of getting more more comic from Legrand and Rocher, and that's what we have here. This is a story about a group of scientists and soldiers going to a planet looking for energy. So a fairly common sci-fi trope, and coming across lots of native hostility. So, but as you can maybe see, I know it's probably hard to see because of the size of the image, but if you can zoom in, you'll notice some jaw-dropping art, which is no surprise given Rocher's abilities. And I think this is going to probably be one of the imports of the year if I'm willing to place a bet. This next one had me at die-cut hardcover. I am an absolute easy mark when it comes to collected editions that are uniquely designed. And if you want to really get me, give me a die-cut hardcover book. It almost doesn't matter what the subject is. I'm into it. So in this case, we've got a die-cut hardcover of Sherlock Holmes in his classic hat and pipe, where the look beyond is someone on a ladder in a deep library. And this is just 100% my kind of thing. This is written by Benoit Dahan and Cyril Leron, and Dahan does the art. So co-writers are Leron and Dahan, with art by Dahan. And it's as you can imagine, a Sherlock Holmes book inside the mind of Sherlock Holmes. It's 96 pages. It is another import, a French comic that's imported over. But as you can see from the solicit images, there are effectively just infographics featuring looks into Sherlock's mind, how it works, the crazy creativity that lets him connect the dots and become the world's greatest detective. So I love a good infographic. I love die-cut hardcovers. I love Sherlock Holmes. So this is three great tastes that taste even better together. We're going to jump over to Ablaze, and if we're talking Ablaze, you can imagine we're probably talking about The Mighty Barbarians. We're up to issue number 4. This is Michael Morecci and Giuseppe Caffaro's team up of a bunch of different fantasy realm characters, including Kull. And we talked about the first issue, which dropped a few weeks ago. It was awesome, and I would expect that as long as the series runs, it's going to be some very well done high adventure. We've got Dark Horse, and I still am not used to seeing Dark Horse in the back of previews like one of the also-ran publishers, but that's where we find ourselves. Nevertheless, we've got All 8 Eyes number 4, which is written by Steve Fox with art by Peter Kowalski. Another one of those books where we talked about the first issue a few weeks back on the podcast. This is basically a love letter to 80s monster movies. And in this case, the monsters are gigantic, kaiju-sized spiders taking over New York City. We've got also at Dark Horse Where Monsters Lie, the trade paperback. Now, I have been happily reading this in issues. The series issue number 4 just wrapped up. Another Kyle Starks book and another Peter Kowalski book. So there's lots of creative continuity this month, it seems. But as I probably have said several times already, Kyle Starks is having an incredible year so far. And Kowalski is just so prolific, but yet every page is a wonder to look at. So I don't know how he does it. So this was a very fun, very dark look at a world where a bunch of the archetype serial killers that we've seen in so many movies over the years all live together on a suburban block and are confronted with police coming to end their existence. And then we've got a very big change in tone, because that book is certainly the last 2 books are more of comedic takes with a horror tinge. This is The Bomb, the weapon that changed the world, and this is from Abrams Comic Arts. This is written by Laurent Frederic Bouilly and Didier Alcant, with art by Denis Rodier, another French import. And this is a far more serious topic, although nonetheless horrific. It chronicles the creation of the atomic bomb that landed on Hiroshima. So heavy stuff. I understand if it's not the kind of thing you want to read in a comic, if you use comics purely as an escape. But I do find that part of our world's history fascinating, and I have such faith in Abrams when they bring a French import over that I am excited to give this a read. From Abstract Studios, we've got Terry Moore's Parker Girls number 9. Another issue in the story. It's in the middle of an arc, but listen, I talk about this every month for good reason. It's Terry Moore at his best, writing the characters that we most care about from his extended universe. Clover Press. They floored me with this. I didn't see this coming. We have Project MK Ultra, the complete edition. Now, I have read and loved both Volumes 1 and Volumes 2 of Project MK Ultra, written by Brendan Beckner and Scott Sampia, with art by Stuart Moore. In fact, I've gotten to know, at least in as much as someone gets to know someone online, I've gotten to know Stuart Moore. It's actually Stuart Kenneth Moore. The solicit says Stuart Moore, but I believe professionally he goes by Stuart Kenneth Moore. Stuart's art in these books is just beyond. It is not capable for me to just use words on a podcast to describe the art. And that's really important because these books look at the CIA-based experiments using hallucinogens, mainly LSD, back, many decades ago. And Moore puts just every ounce of creativity on these pages to try and reflect what it would be like to be tripping balls when you're on LSD. And I have both, like I said, both volumes in hardcovers, and I just thought that's how we'd get it because they're hardcovers. But no, Clover Press is going back to the well and giving us a complete edition hardcover. So I'm back on board. I'm going to absolutely buy this, and then give the 2 volumes away to some other lucky person, because it's absolutely this kind of collection format is right up my alley, and the book is certainly worthy of being on my shelves for time immemorial. We've got, from Fanta, we've got Proof That the Devil Loves You by Gilbert Hernandez. Every year or two, Gilbert gives us a new graphic novel featuring Fritz, his B-movie actor's character, and everyone's been a treat. I don't see why this one won't be either, and you can be sure that when it comes out, we will likely wax lovingly about it on the podcast. We've got another book from Fanta, Okinawa, by Susumi Higa. This is, as you might imagine, a manga that 544 pages chronicles the events that built up and then led to our bombing of Japan. And so this centers around Okinawa, which is where the one of the most important battles of the Pacific campaign, and this chronicles that from a Japanese perspective. So I think this is going to be quite powerful stuff. Then we've got Star Seeds number 3, so very different type of comic than Okinawa. This is by Charles Globitz. This is volume 3, so if you haven't read Star Seeds 1 or 2, I would skip this. But I very much have been mesmerized by the first 2 volumes. This is something that's difficult to define, difficult to define. It is trippy and cosmic and psychedelic. It is, at its core, a lot of different ideas about the grand scheme of things, with like mythology and spirituality, all this rolled into one, that Glaubitz then puts on the page with these Kirby-esque cosmic drawings. So this is one of those books where you more immerse yourself in the experience of it and are washed over by the magnitude of the visuals than you are there for a narrative per se. But it's certainly really high quality stuff, and I thought the first 2 volumes were terrific. So I'm sure this 3rd volume will continue to run the race and grab the baton. This one is interesting. So it's Box Brown. Box has been quite prolific over the years, doing every year or 2 he puts out a graphic novel that looks at some aspect of the world. He's done books about marijuana and the legalization of it. He did a great book about Andre the Giant because he's a huge wrestling fan. This is his latest. It's called The He-Man Effect, How American Toy Makers Sold Your Childhood. It's a very combative title, and if you read the solicit text, it's essentially that. He's arguing, and I presume he's got some academic papers that are driving his research into this, but he's arguing that we children of the 80s, so many of you listening to this and myself, were forever tainted by the way that toy companies marketed things like He-Man and G.I. Joe and Transformers to us. So I'm fascinated by that because I am a child of that era. I was absolutely nostalgically sated by those characters and those cartoons and those toys, and continue to love those properties as an adult. Not so much He-Man for me, but I understand, but very adjacent, and certainly many of you are Masters of the Universe fans, and but I don't think you need to be a He-Man fan per se to this. Just more of someone who grew up in the 80s. So I'm very intrigued by what he's going to say here. I'm not sure I'm going to buy into what he's saying, but that's part of the fun. So let's see what he has to say. One thing I know for sure is it'll be well drawn and it'll be well composed. So it'll be a good read regardless of whether I agree with his premise, and look forward to discussing it further. Very, very happy to see Greg and Fake back with the Santos Sisters #5. You know, Santos Sisters 1 was one of those super hot indie books that came out of nowhere. Everybody talked about. Everybody tried to get a copy. I had to order a copy from our friends at Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago and have it mailed from there. But it was one of those books, and visually it looks very much like a Dan Parent Archie comic, but it's got a slightly naughtier bent to it. It's got a slightly superhero bent to it. It's a weird comic that could very much live in the Archieverse, but kind of like an alternate dimension Archieverse where weird stuff happens. Anyway, I say I'm happy to see this because the first issue was this hot thing, but it took them years to put out, and it had a slow build, and then it went supernova once we all caught on to it. And then they put out a second issue a year or so later. We met them at Heroes Convention, talked to them about that time, and it definitely was a side gig for them. But I think the momentum of those two issues was such that they are now putting out issues very frequently. And we've gotten, I believe this will be the third issue in less than a calendar year. So very cool to see, and I wish them all the success. And I know for a fact that since I've enjoyed the issues I've read of it so far, there's no reason to stop buying them when they're solicited. We've got a book from Mad Cave, which I think may be the first time I've recommended a Mad Cave book on one of these videos. This is written by Zach Thompson with art by Bailey Underwood. It's called Nature's Labyrinth. This is a 152-page collection of the first 6 issues of the series. Now, I must admit, probably because I haven't been paying much attention to Mad Cave as much as I should, I didn't remember seeing Nature's Labyrinth in issue form being solicited. Just didn't notice it. It didn't catch my eye. But this packaging and solicit of the collection did catch my eye, and I went and looked up Bailey Underwood's artwork online, and I think the art is terrific. It's clean. It reminds me a bit of Tilly Walden, actually. And the story here is essentially a battle royal style game on an island involving 8 violent felons fighting for their survival. So that seems, in a very depraved way, hella fun to read. So I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to take the leap, even though I've heard next to nothing about the series as it was coming out in issues. And then last but certainly not least, those of you that are familiar with the previews catalog know that it's all the US-based publishers in the front, and then we move to a section of manga, and then they move to things like toys and collectibles. So it stands to reason that the last recommendation you're ever going to see in one of these videos as we go chronologically is a manga, but you also know that I rarely recommend manga to you because there are far more of you out there that are far more plugged into manga that I listen to you guys recommending stuff to me versus the other way around. But anytime Junji Ito is going to give us a new collection via Viz, I'm going to mention it because I don't ever miss a Junji Ito collection, and he never disappoints. So we've got Soichi, which is the latest collection of dark comedy horror comics from him. Horror manga, I should say. And yeah, listen, this is a known thing, right? If there have been enough Viz Junji Ito horror manga imports for you to know if it's your thing or not. And so it's pretty binary. If you've liked what you've read of Ito to this point, throw this in your order. If body horror and Ito sensibilities aren't your thing, well, then pass it on by. That will do it for this month. It was a fairly big month, so a long video. Hopefully I didn't take too much of your valuable time. I hope that at least I turned you on to a few things in this long chat that you maybe hadn't noticed but are now excited to try. As always, if you want to tell me what you think I missed and should be excited about, that would thrill me. And the easiest way to do that is to hit us up on our Patreon at patreon.com/11o'clockcomics. Many of the members of our Patreon are given access to a Slack channel where we are whiling away each and every day talking about comics and life and everything. And so there's a great way to talk about what you think I missed there. Or you can check out our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/11o'clockcomics. And you can ping me there as well. So hope you have a great rest of your month and make sure to get those pre-orders in.